Joining me now is Stacey Sumereau, the author of this book, Adventure Awaits: How to Interpret Your Desires and Hear God's Voice. She's also the host of the Called and Caffeinated podcast, and she's a former Broadway actress who is now married with 4 kids and a 5th on the way. Stacey, welcome to This Is the Day.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being here.
I'm so happy to have you because I feel like I know you since I've been listening to your podcast for 6 years. And so this is really fun for me. And I was really excited to see that you wrote a book. And so I want to talk about it. One of the themes of the book is about how God can purify our desires when we take action on them. So could you talk about how that worked with your career on Broadway and how you eventually pivoted away from that?
Yes. So if you're familiar with the temperaments, I am a choleric. So that means I am just naturally inclined towards action. And I'd say I've done a lot of things wrong in my discernment, but I would say one of the things that I actually don't find difficult to do is to take action on my desires. And I think, you have to know yourself. Some people are more inclined to just sit there and wait for God to reveal the answer, right? But when you take action, even if your desire is not the noblest desire, don't judge it before it even makes it, the thought even makes it out of your mouth, right? Don't judge it because God has planted a desire in your heart that is going to lead you somewhere when you take action on it. And so in my life, I was very passionate about theater. It was a good desire that was also mixed with a lot of worldly motivations, but I went to New York City and I pursued that. And it was through that pursuit of my desires that I actually started to find success in theater, and then to actually find out that that didn't fulfill me the way that I thought it would. I was living my dream. I was on a Broadway national tour of Beauty and the Beast, a little movie you might have heard of, and we were playing these epic theaters across the country, 43 states and every province of Canada. I was living my dream. And yet this worm of discontent was telling me, that's a term that I made up, by the way. That's not something you're going to find anywhere else. But it just kind of eats away in your stomach. It's like, this little voice that's like, you're not really living the life that you actually want to live. There's something out there that's deeper, that's going to be more fulfilling, and this isn't it. And that worm of discontent is so inconvenient, but it is so good. It's so purifying. And so I finally had to acknowledge that, there's something in this dissatisfaction. And I left theater. I started moving away from it. And I actually started for the first time in my life surrendering my desires to the Lord, which was extremely difficult for me as a person of action to actually take a receptive posture to what the Lord wanted to give me. But it was through that pursuit, it was through seeing those dreams through, rather than sitting around and wondering about them, that I actually got to the next level of my desire. And what I found was that underneath this desire for this theater dream that I've always had was a desire that was deeper, and it was for community. It was the expression of community and building up the kingdom that was kind of masked as this desire for theater. But my desires are lived out more fully now as a stay-at-home mom and a speaker and a podcaster than they ever were as a theater performer. I think there's such tremendous hope in that because, the Lord He's always purifying us. And when we bring Him our desires, He doesn't want to judge us and say, oh, okay, you want this, I'm going to take it away from you. But He actually wants to fulfill that desire, either in the way that we think He's going to, or in a bigger and a deeper way.
And Stacey, one of my favorite lines from your book was, I think God likes to prove He can't be outdone in generosity. When we give Him a day, He gives us a month of peace. When we give Him a year to discern His will, He gives us a lifetime of purpose and happiness. And when we give Him our whole life, He gives us eternity. And I'd love to hear how that played out for you.
Yes. So, when we, God is not a slot machine where you put in a dime and you win the lottery, right? That's not how the life of a Christian works. And so we're not saying that, the Lord is going to reward you necessarily with money or fame or any of these things that maybe you think you want right now, right? But the Lord is generous in his way, which ultimately is the thing that's best for us. What I didn't realize when I was slowly learning to detach myself from this, this tight grip on my own dreams and my own desires, when I was finally learning to surrender to the Lord, what I didn't realize was that my time discerning religious life was going to be the best gift that I could give to my future husband. And now that I am married, and my husband also actually discerned religious life as well. He wanted to be a Carthusian monk for 6 years, and he gave himself, exclusively to the Lord. He didn't date anybody in that time. He's visited a lot of monasteries, and we look back at our mutual separate time discerning our vocations in religious life, and we're so grateful because we can see that formation actually helped us to overcome a lot of the hurdles that we might have otherwise struggled with in marriage. And so we didn't even realize that by giving the Lord this little gift, we were actually going to gain a much happier marriage and a much more fulfilling marriage. And that's just the example in my life, but the Lord loves to do that for each one of his followers.
And really quick, tell us about the reality series you were on where you did discern religious life.
Yeah, that was so it was called the Sisterhood Becoming Nuns. It was on Lifetime in 2014, which is wild. And or maybe it was 2015. I can't remember. It was like 10 years ago. And it was a small part of my discernment of religious life. Everybody always wants to know, was it a real experience? And I love to say, yes, it was. However, what you see on television was definitely made for TV. You can watch it and, watch me crying about my life choices, and that's great. They had us wear like discernment uniforms, which were just like, that's not a real thing. So there were a lot of like made for TV aspects about it. However, the really valuable part for me was the holy hour and mass that we did with the sisters before the cameras arrived. And that was where the Lord was doing really good and deep work in my heart. You won't see that when you watch the TV show, but it was a real authentic discernment experience. And I also visited convents off camera to make sure that, I wasn't just getting, my entire discernment experience wasn't just like on worldwide television. So I started getting messages from people around the world who were just as confused as I was. And that started off my whole podcast. That started my ministry because I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. And apparently nobody else does either. So let's learn about this. And how about I become a curious observer and a learner? And that launched my podcast called Caffeinated. And it's been a beautiful conversation about discerning the Lord's voice ever since.
Yeah, it's been such a gift, Stacey, and your book, Adventure Awaits, people can get it at avemariapress.com. Also, your website, staceysumereau.com. They can find your podcast. They can find some of the candles that you make. We didn't even talk about that. That's super cool. But it has been a joy to talk to you, Stacey.